The fluorescent lights in First National Bank made everything look sterile and cold. I stood at the counter with my loan application, watching my mother's face harden as she read through the paperwork. My father sat beside her in his pressed suit, arms crossed. My brother Tyler leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone like I wasn't even there. "We've done enough," my father said finally, pushing the documents back toward me. My mother didn't even look up. "You need to figure this out yourself, Megan." Tyler glanced up for half a second, then went back to his screen. No words, no acknowledgement, just silence that felt like erasure. Around us, other customers pretended not to watch, but I felt their eyes. The teller at the next window paused mid-transaction. An elderly couple near the door whispered to each other. I gathered my papers with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let them. Not here. Not in front of these people who had just decided I wasn't worth their help. "Understood," I said quietly. "If they won't help me here in public, where they could have saved face by saying yes, where does that leave me?" The answer settled in my chest like ice. Completely alone. I walked toward the glass doors, forcing my shoulders back and my chin up. Every step felt deliberate, measured. My hands trembled as I clutched the folder containing my rejected dreams, but I kept my face blank. The automatic doors opened, letting in a blast of October air that stung my eyes. At least that gave me an excuse if tears came. But they didn't. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice resume its normal pitch, talking to the bank manager about something unrelated. Moving on. Like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. Like I hadn't just asked for help and been publicly denied. My car sat 3 rows back in the parking lot. A 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door and an engine that made questionable sounds on cold mornings. But it was mine, paid for by myself, and it would get me away from here. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there, staring at the bank through my windshield. They think this is the end of my story. They think I'll disappear now, prove them right about every assumption they've made. My name is Megan Clark and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life I've been the family problem. The cautionary tale. The one they compare to Tyler when they want to make a point about responsibility. I wasn't always struggling. Once I had a good job in pharmaceutical sales, a decent apartment, savings. Then the company downsized and I got caught in the purge along with 40% of the sales force. 3 months later, my landlord sold the building and everyone had to move. 2 months after that, my car got totaled by an uninsured driver. Bad luck comes in clusters sometimes. But my family saw it differently. They saw confirmation of what they'd always suspected, that I was somehow less capable, less careful, less deserving than the golden child sitting in that bank lobby scrolling through his phone. How did I end up here, begging my own family for a temporary bridge loan while I got back on my feet? The answer stretched back years, woven through 1,000 small moments of being overlooked. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving them behind. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Everyone gathered at my parents' house in their gated community outside Phoenix. Tyler had just made partner at his law firm. 29 years old and already positioned for wealth. "Tell them your news," my mother urged him, her face glowing with pride. He'd bought a house. Not just any house, but a 4-bedroom Craftsman in Scottsdale with a pool and mountain views. My parents reacted like he'd won the Nobel Prize. Champagne appeared. Congratulations flowed. I'd been sitting there with my own news, smaller but meaningful to me. A promotion to senior sales representative, a $5,000 raise. When I mentioned it during a pause in the celebration, my father nodded once. "Good. That's good, Megan. You need to keep building stability." My mother patted my hand. "Just be careful not to overspend with the extra money. You should be saving." Tyler got champagne. I got advice wrapped in caution. The pattern wasn't new. It stretched back through birthdays, graduations, every milestone. This didn't start at the bank today. It started in childhood and never stopped. In the bank, before my father spoke those final words, I'd laid out my request clearly. I'd prepared documentation, spreadsheets, a repayment plan. I need $8,000 for first month's rent and deposit on an apartment, I'd explained. Current income from temp work is $2,000 monthly. I have 3 job interviews next week for positions starting at $55,000 annually. I can pay you back within 6 months, with interest if you want. Everything reasonable. Everything documented. A short-term bridge while I rebuilt after the cascade of bad luck. My mother had studied the papers like they were written in a foreign language. My father's expression never changed from that closed-off skepticism. Tyler hadn't even pretended to listen. "We gave you money when you lost your job," my father said. "That was 4 months ago." "That was $2,000 that kept me fed," I replied. "This is different. This is structured." But their faces had already hardened. Their decision was made before I finished speaking. They weren't confused about what I needed. They were choosing to say no. And doing it publicly made the message even clearer. I left the bank and drove to the public library where I'd been spending my days. Free Wi-Fi, quiet spaces, nobody asking questions. I set up my laptop in my usual corner and tried to focus on job applications. But my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Mom's upset. You embarrassed her." I stared at that message for a long time. I'd embarrassed her. Not she'd embarrassed me by refusing to help her own daughter. The blame somehow circled back to land on me. Later that evening I called my mother. Not to argue, just to understand. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice tight. "What is it, Megan?" "I just wanted to explain again why I needed." "We've talked about this. Your father and I discussed it thoroughly. Helping you would just enable failure. You need to learn to stand on your own." Enable failure. Those 2 words hung in the air between us. "I have been standing on my own," I said quietly. "I've been doing temp work, applying everywhere, selling my furniture. I just needed one bridge." "Then find another way," she replied. "We're not your safety net." So that's who they think I am. Someone whose struggles result from character flaws rather than circumstances. That night I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot. I'd been sleeping in my car for 3 weeks, rotating between different lots to avoid security. A gym membership gave me shower access. The library gave me daytime refuge. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel. I didn't call friends to vent. I just sat there in the dark, letting the reality settle over me. My family had resources. My father's financial consulting business generated 6 figures annually. My mother's inheritance from her parents sat in investments. Tyler's partnership guaranteed him a comfortable life. And they'd watched me slide into homelessness rather than extend a temporary bridge. The anger that filled me wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and clarifying. It sharpened my thinking instead of clouding it. Survival mode clicked on like a switch. And suddenly I knew exactly what I had to do. Pain can be fuel if you let it be. I decided right then to let it burn clean and bright, to let it power every step forward. The next morning I walked into a staffing agency and took the first assignment they offered. Data entry for a medical billing company, $12 an hour, 40 hours a week. The office manager looked surprised when I accepted immediately. "Most people with your resume want something more advanced," she said. "Most people with my resume aren't living in their car," I replied. She blinked, then quickly arranged my start date for Monday. The work was mind-numbing. I sat in a cubicle entering insurance codes into a database, 8 hours a day. My degree in business management and 5 years of pharmaceutical sales experience were completely wasted here. But it was income. $480 a week minus taxes. Enough to eat, to save a little, to stay alive. I showed up 15 minutes early every day and stayed late when they needed it. I made myself useful, reliable, invisible. The other workers gossiped about their weekends. I kept my head down and worked. This isn't my destination, I reminded myself every morning. This is survival. This is the foundation I'm building alone. I sold everything I could. My furniture had already gone to pay last month's storage unit before I gave that up. Now I listed my jewelry, my books, my winter coats, anything with value. A vintage watch my grandmother left me brought in $200. A collection of first edition novels I'd been gathering for years sold for $350. My nice work clothes, the suits and dresses from my sales career, went to consignment shops. Sale hurt. These were pieces of my identity, my past, my better days. But sentiment was a luxury I couldn't afford. Weekends disappeared. I picked up shifts at a restaurant doing dishes, 6-hour blocks that left me exhausted but added another $150 a week. My social life evaporated. Friends stopped calling after I declined enough invitations. I stopped posting on social media. I became a ghost, focused entirely on rebuilding. And I didn't tell anyone in my family what I was doing. They thought I'd disappeared into failure. Let them think that. They don't deserve updates on my progress. At the medical billing office, I started noticing patterns. The company's database system was outdated and inefficient. Claims that should have processed in minutes took hours. Errors occurred regularly because the interface was confusing. During my lunch breaks, I began sketching out improvements. Better workflow logic, clearer data entry fields, automated error checking. Small optimizations that could save hours of labor. I'd minored in information systems back in college, but never pursued it professionally. Sales had seemed more lucrative. Now, stuck in data entry, those old skills reawakened. After 3 months, I'd created a complete redesign proposal. I brought it to my supervisor, expecting nothing. She studied it for a long time, then forwarded it to the operations director. 2 weeks later, they implemented my suggestions. Processing time dropped by 30%. Error rates fell dramatically. The operations director called me into her office. "This is exceptional work, Megan. Have you considered systems analysis as a career?" I discovered I was exceptional at something my family had never valued: solving complex technical problems. This changes everything. The medical billing company offered me a position as junior systems analyst. $45,000 annually, benefits, actual career potential. I accepted before she finished outlining the responsibilities. Within 2 months, I'd optimized 3 more workflows and saved the company an estimated $60,000 annually in labor costs. The director submitted my work to the parent company's corporate office. They noticed. A regional manager contacted me about consulting for other facilities in their network. My first consulting payment was $5,000 for a week's work. I stared at that direct deposit notification for 10 minutes, unable to believe it was real. Nobody in my family knew. I hadn't spoken to them in 7 months. No calls, no texts, no updates. I disappeared from their world completely. The success felt different because it was entirely mine. Built from nothing, achieved alone, proven through competence rather than connections. I didn't call my mother to share the news. Didn't text Tyler to prove I wasn't the failure they'd labeled me. This win belonged only to me, and they don't deserve to know about it. I started seeing my family differently. Distance and silence gave me perspective I'd never had. They maintained their status through carefully managed appearances. My father's business relied on wealthy clients who trusted his judgment. My mother's social standing in their community came from associations and reputation. Tyler's law firm partnership depended on projecting success. Everything was about image, perception, the right connections. And I'd always been the crack in that perfect facade. The daughter who struggled. The cautionary tale they could point to when teaching lessons about responsibility. My silence served them. My absence removed an embarrassment. They benefited from my going away quietly. I realized they'd always relied on my loyalty, my family obligation, my willingness to accept less while they maintained more. They'd counted on me never challenging the hierarchy they'd established. What happens when I stop playing my role? The question intrigued me. What happens when the person they've discounted simply steps out of the game entirely? I decided to find out. The consulting work expanded. The parent company offered me a permanent position as a senior systems consultant, traveling to their facilities nationwide, implementing optimization solutions. $78,000 annually, plus travel stipends and performance bonuses. An actual career, built from scratch in less than a year. But the real turning point came during a meeting with the company's vice president of operations. He mentioned their expansion plans, the acquisition of smaller competitors, the need for standardized systems across a growing network. "We need someone who understands both the technical side and the business implications," he said. "Someone who can see the big picture while managing details." He was describing a position that didn't exist yet. Director of Systems Integration. A role that would put me near real power, decision-making power, influence over how the entire company operated. "I'd like to be considered for that," I said. He studied me thoughtfully. "You've been here less than a year. And I've already saved you hundreds of thousands in efficiency gains," I replied. "Imagine what I could do with actual authority." 2 months later, they created the position and gave it to me. Now I see how things really work from the inside. I stopped checking my family's social media. Stopped wondering what they were doing, how they were succeeding without me. Their world and mine had diverged completely. My mother called once, 8 months after the bank incident. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. Tyler sent a text around Christmas. "You alive?" I didn't respond. No explanations, no updates, no attempts to maintain connection. I simply disappeared from their lives while building my own elsewhere. At first, I thought they might notice my absence, might wonder why I'd gone silent. But as months passed with no follow-up calls or messages, I realized something important. They'd never really seen me anyway. Their lack of curiosity about where I'd gone or how I was surviving confirmed everything I'd suspected. I was scenery in their lives, not a person they valued. The distance grew comfortable. I didn't miss the comparisons to Tyler, the unsolicited advice, the subtle implications that my struggles resulted from character defects. They don't notice at first when someone stops reaching out. They never do, until suddenly they need you for something. I heard the whispers through an old friend who still had connections to my parents' social circle. Trouble was brewing in the Clark family empire. My father's consulting business was facing scrutiny. Some investment advice he'd given hadn't panned out well, and angry clients were asking questions. Nothing illegal but reputation damaging. Tyler's law firm was struggling after losing a major client. Partnership meant his income was tied directly to the firm's success, and success was declining. My mother's social standing had taken hits too. Apparently she'd made some enemies by backing the wrong side in a country club dispute. None of it was catastrophic yet. Just cracks in the facade. Small signs that their world wasn't as solid as it appeared. I learned this information secondhand, filtered through gossip and speculation. My family certainly wasn't reaching out to tell me directly. But I filed the knowledge away, curious about where those cracks might lead. Overconfidence and entitlement make poor foundations. Eventually, pressure finds the weak points. Their world isn't as solid as it looks. I wondered if they realized that yet. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother's number appeared on my phone screen after a year of silence. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Megan. Oh honey, it's so good to hear your voice." Her tone was bright, friendly, like we just talked yesterday. "We've been wondering how you're doing." "Have you?" I said flatly. "Of course. You've been so distant lately. We thought maybe you needed space, but it's been long enough. We should get together for dinner." No acknowledgement of the bank. No mention of my desperate situation or their refusal to help. Just casual cheer, as if none of that had happened. "I've been busy," I replied. "Doing what? Are you working?" "Tyler said he hasn't heard from you either." The fishing expedition was obvious. They wanted information but weren't willing to admit they'd lost track of me completely. "Things are fine," I said, offering nothing else. "Well, that's wonderful. Listen, we're having a family dinner next Sunday. You should come. It's been too long." I smiled at the wall of my apartment. An actual apartment now, with furniture and everything. "I'll think about it." Like nothing happened. Like they hadn't watched me fall and done nothing. I said nothing except polite deflection, and that seemed to satisfy her. My father called 2 days later. Less friendly than my mother, more direct. "Your mother says you might come to dinner Sunday," he began without preamble. "We need to discuss something important with you." "What is it?" I asked. "Not over the phone. Family business. We'll talk at dinner." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't really optional. Family business meant they needed something, and my presence was required. I agreed to come, curious now about what could have prompted this sudden interest in reconnecting. Sunday arrived. I drove to their house in Scottsdale, parking behind Tyler's Mercedes. The house looked exactly the same. Perfectly landscaped, expensive cars in the driveway, wealth displayed casually. Inside, my mother hugged me like we hadn't spent a year without contact. Tyler nodded but didn't get up from the couch. My father shook my hand formally. Over dinner they made small talk about nothing important. I waited, knowing the real conversation would come eventually. Finally, over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "We need your help with something, Megan. It's a family obligation, and we're hoping you'll step up." Funny how that word works. Obligation. It only seems to apply when they need something from me. My father explained the situation carefully. His consulting business was facing a crisis. Several clients had threatened legal action over investment losses. The complaints were gaining attention, potentially damaging his reputation beyond repair. "I need character references," he said. "Statements from family members about my integrity, my track record. Tyler's providing one, of course. Your mother too. But it would help to have testimony from you as well." I set down my fork slowly. Testimony. Just a written statement. Maybe an appearance at a hearing if it comes to that. Supporting your father, showing family unity. Tyler jumped in. "It's not a big deal, Megan. Just standard reputation defense. Family supports family, right?" I looked around the table at their expectant faces. A year ago I'd been desperate, living in my car, begging for $8,000. They'd refused in the most public, humiliating way possible. Now they needed something from me. Character testimony. Public support. My willingness to vouch for my father's integrity. The irony was almost beautiful. "I need to think about it," I said calmly. My mother's face tightened. "Think about it. Megan, this is your father." "I understand. And I need to think about it." I realized in that moment that I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to actively destroy them. I just need to step aside. Doing nothing can be powerful too. I didn't provide the character statement. Didn't show up for the hearing. Didn't make excuses or explain my absence. Simply didn't participate. My father called 3 times. I didn't answer. Tyler sent angry texts about family loyalty. I didn't respond. My mother left a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Without my testimony, without family unity on display, my father's defense looked weaker. The hearing didn't go well. Sanctions were imposed, not severe but embarrassing. Public acknowledgement of poor judgment. His business suffered. Clients left. Referrals dried up. Not because of anything I did but because systems moved as designed. No favors. No shortcuts. No family connections smoothing over problems. I'd simply stepped aside and let reality take its course. Tyler's law firm situation worsened too. Without my father's wealthy connections providing referrals, their client base continued shrinking. The firm announced downsizing. Partners would need to take pay cuts. Nothing I'd caused. Just consequences flowing naturally from their own choices and circumstances. They blamed everyone but themselves. The vindictive clients, the unfair hearing officers, the changing legal market. Never their own arrogance or assumptions. 6 months after that dinner, the real collapse began. My father's business imploded completely. Too many clients lost, too much reputation damage, too few new opportunities. He was forced to dissolve the practice and take a position with a larger firm. Not as an owner, as an employee. The reduction in status devastated him. Tyler got pushed out of his partnership. The firm's restructuring eliminated his position entirely. He landed at a smaller practice making half his previous income. My mother's social world crumbled as their financial situation deteriorated. They had to sell the Scottsdale house, downsize to a modest condo. Country club memberships were cancelled. The carefully maintained facade of success cracked wide open. Pride turned into panic. The family that had seemed untouchable was suddenly scrambling to maintain basics. And through it all, I remained absent. No calls offering sympathy. No attempts to help. Just silence. They taught me well. When someone struggles, you let them figure it out themselves. Helping them would just enable failure, right? Now they remember me clearly. Now my absence isn't just noticed, it's felt. Because the person they dismissed, the family embarrassment, was nowhere to be found when they needed support. My mother called again. Her voice was different this time. Smaller. Uncertain. "Megan, please. We need to talk." I met her at a coffee shop near their new condo. She looked older, tired. The polish I'd always associated with her had dulled. "Your father is struggling," she said quietly. "Tyler too. Everything is falling apart, and we don't know how to stop it." I sipped my coffee and waited. I know we haven't been close this past year. I know there were problems. But family is supposed to help each other during hard times. The words hung between us, loaded with irony neither of us acknowledged. "We were hoping," she continued, "that maybe you could speak to some people. Put in good words for your father. Maybe your company needs legal consulting. Tyler could help with that." So that was it. The final request. Connections, assistance, my professional network offered up to solve their problems. I set down my coffee cup carefully. "Why would I do that?" She blinked. "Because we're family." "Family," I repeated. "Like when I needed $8,000 for an apartment." Her face changed. "That was different." "How?" Silence. She had no answer that wouldn't condemn her. I leaned forward, speaking clearly and calmly. "Let me remind you exactly what you said. Helping you would just enable failure. You need to learn to stand on your own. We're not your safety net." My mother's face went pale. "Those were your exact words when I was living in my car, when I'd hit bottom through no fault of my own, when I asked for temporary help with documentation and a repayment plan. Megan, please. You told me to find another way. So I did. I found another way without you, and I built something real, something stable, something that's entirely mine." She started to cry. Quiet tears that might have moved me once. "Now you're struggling. Now you need help. And you want family obligation to work in your favor. We made a mistake," she whispered. "We should have helped you. Yes, you should have. But you didn't. And that choice has consequences." I stood up, leaving money on the table for my coffee. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm simply offering you the same support you offered me. Nothing. You'll figure it out yourselves, or you won't. Either way, it's not my problem." She sat there staring at me, finally hearing herself for the first time. The mirror I'd held up reflecting her own words back. Over the following months, I watched from a distance as they struggled without intervention from me. My father's new position didn't last. His reputation preceded him, and he couldn't regain footing. Eventually he semi-retired, doing occasional freelance work that barely covered expenses. Tyler bounced between smaller firms, never finding stability. His marriage to his college girlfriend ended, another casualty of stress and reduced circumstances. My mother had to take a part-time job for the first time in 30 years. The woman who'd never worked outside volunteer positions now stood behind a department store counter. None of it brought me joy. I didn't celebrate their downfall or feel vindicated. I just watched it happen with the same detachment they'd shown when I struggled. They'd built their status on arrogance and entitlement, believing their success was permanent and deserved. They treated people as disposable when those people didn't serve their needs. Reality caught up eventually. Not through my revenge, just through natural consequences. And I didn't stay to watch the final dissolution. There was no point. They'd made their choices, and those choices had led here. My presence or absence didn't change that. I didn't destroy them. They did that themselves, one dismissive choice at a time. My career continued growing. Director of Systems Integration led to Vice President of Operations within 18 months. The company expanded rapidly, and I expanded with it. By my 35th birthday, I was making $160,000 annually with stock options and bonuses. I bought a house in Denver, 2 bedrooms with mountain views. Nothing ostentatious, just comfortable and mine. I dated casually, made new friends who knew nothing about my past. Built a life that had no connection to the family that had rejected me. The old friend who'd first told me about my family's troubles reached out occasionally. "Your mom asked about you again," she'd report. "Wanted to know if you're doing okay." "Tell her I'm fine," I'd reply. And that's all you need to tell her. Security felt better than approval. Self-sufficiency felt better than connection. Peace felt better than family obligation. I'd learned to value myself when nobody else would. That lesson had cost everything but taught me more than comfort ever could. Now I stood on ground I'd built alone, and nothing could take that from me. 2 years after that coffee shop conversation, I received a letter from my mother. Not an email or text, an actual handwritten letter. In it she apologized. Explained how they'd been wrong, how they'd failed me, how they understood now what they'd done. She asked for nothing except forgiveness, someday if I could manage it. I read it twice, then filed it away in a drawer. Maybe someday I would forgive them. Maybe the anger would fade into simple sadness for what could have been. Maybe I'd reach out and rebuild something small and careful. But not today. Today I had work to do, goals to meet, a life to live that didn't require their validation or participation. I walked away from the drawer and went about my day. No bitterness weighing me down, no revenge fantasy playing in my head. Just moving forward, building higher, becoming more. The final truth settled clearly. Know your worth when nobody else does. Build quietly when they're not watching. Let consequences speak louder than anger ever could. My family had refused to help me when I was down. Now they paid the price, not because I sought revenge, but because I simply let them experience what I had. The world without a safety net, without family support, without someone catching them when they fell. I didn't destroy them. I just stepped aside and let them fall on their own.